Hi class, it's Mrs. Fickus. Today we're going to talk about how to prep a canvas for painting. And some artists buy their own canvases, some stretch them themselves, and that's a whole different process that requires quite a bit of space. But I'll kind of explain the process as we're looking at different canvases, and we'll kind of talk about some different types of canvases that you can purchase. So we're going to talk about how to prep a canvas for painting, which is called toning and prepping your canvas. Let's get started. Right here on my countertop, I have some supplies set out. I've got different types of canvases here. I've got, this one's unwrapped. It was wrapped in plastic. I bought a pack from Michaels. Here's the little card that was on the pack. 7 of them that are 11 by 14. And it was less than $20 for 7 of them. So that's a really good price. You know, it was, $3 or less per canvas. They come white like this. It'll come wrapped in some plastic on top of the plastic that was already on the whole pack. You got to unwrap it. This is called a standard profile canvas, wrapped canvas. Some canvases will not be wrapped. They will come around the side and there'll be staples right here in the edge. I prefer the wrapped canvases because I like that extra protection of the canvas wrapping all the way around. This is what canvas looks like. It's actually kind of a tannish color. This is cotton canvas, not linen. Linen is expensive. Linen is grown and produced in Belgium. So a linen fabric is more expensive than a canvas fabric. And they each have their own pluses and minuses, pros and cons. So this is a wooden frame that has been built. And then the canvas has been stretched over it. So they lay the wooden frame down on top of the fabric. You cut it. First of all, you cut it to the right size, giving yourself plenty of edge. Pull it over, staple it with a staple gun. Then pull the opposite side up, trying to make it as tight as possible without any wrinkles. Staple, staple, staple. Then you go to the other side, pull it, staple, staple, staple. And then this side, pull it, staple, staple, staple. And your whole goal is to make it nice and tight. Then, once it's been done that way, there's a white coat of something called gesso, acrylic gesso, that is spread over it. And what this does is it smooths out the fabric, kind of tightens it a little bit as it dries, and it creates a barrier between your paints and the actual fabric because your paints will eat through the cloth over time. So it protects it. Now, like I said, this is a standard thickness. Okay, so it's about that wide. I like using these, the standard thickness for small paintings and for like practice paintings, sketches, to get an idea. These are really good if you're painting plein air. Plein air is whenever you're dragging all your stuff outside and painting actually outside. You don't want to use too big of a canvas for that because you really only want to spend 2 or 3 hours painting outside because the light moves and changes all your shadows and colors. And the wind can grab a big canvas off of your easel and take it away. I've had that happen. So these are wood panels. And a lot of artists back in the day, like the Mona Lisa, is actually painted on a plywood panel. This is just the same type of wooden frame, but instead of cloth, a piece of very thin plywood has been cut and glued onto it. Now, the nice thing about these, it provides a very solid, stable surface. This has give to it. This has bounce. If someone were to walk by and poke it, they would be able to poke or tear a hole right through it. These, you don't have that problem. So if you were creating a sign or something that was going to be in a high traffic area where you worried about it getting bumped into, this would be a good choice. They're really not much more expensive than a regular canvas. You can buy them in packs. I bought this one in a 4-pack. I've already used one of them. And they are just plywood. They look like that. They're a nice golden plywood. Okay. Now, then you have what are called gallery profile canvases. And this is a gallery profile canvas. Notice how thick the edge is. Also, notice all the bracing. I mean, this is a very sturdy canvas. It's almost like a canvas within a canvas. The reason why I like these, especially if I'm doing much larger paintings, is because sometimes if the canvas that you bought or the wood that you used isn't completely dry, you will end up with this. See how this one is cupping? It's kind of torquing a little bit. It's twisted over time. As the wood dried out, it kind of twisted a bit. So I like to get the more expensive gallery profile canvases because they're a little bit more heavy duty, and as they hang, the wood is less likely to bend and warp. Okay, now we're going to get on toning. Toning your canvas is very important because you're trying to create a surface where the white is not going to show through. And you can tone it a light tan color, like I'm doing these. You can tone it like a gray color, or you can use, if you're painting a nighttime scene, you can use like a dark blue or a black for your nighttime scene to make your clouds really pop out. And we'll talk about here in a minute how the toning of the canvas is actually more beneficial for your use of color rather than just leaving it white. But first I'm going to show you the process, and then later we'll talk about the why. So right here in this old cup of ricotta cheese for making lasagna, I keep all these. Keep your butter tubs, keep your cottage cheese, your dips, like your chip dip or butter containers. They are so useful because now, see, I can just use this, and if I wanted to reuse it again, I could wash it out. And it's not anything like expensive or great. Okay, I'm using my white acrylic gesso. I have some burnt umber. This is a heavy body acrylic paint. You can tell this little tube was, kind of pricey, but it's a very thick, very, very thick, thicker than toothpaste paint, and it's very high quality. I love this stuff. Then I also just have, bought it at Walmart, black. And what I did is I put some of my white gesso in my cup. I put a little squeeze of the burnt umber and a little squeeze of the black. Be careful with the black because you can't take it back out of the white. So you put it in a drip at a time and stir it. Use a plastic knife, or you could even, anything that you want to stir it. Don't use your brush to stir with, because then the paint gets packed up here and it gets down in your brush in between all the hairs. Don't ever, if you have an old crappy brush, use it. If you can use a plastic knife or a plastic spoon, use that. If you have to stir it with your paintbrush, use the handle. Don't use the brush. You'll just ruin it. Stir it up really good and then add more black if you have to. Okay, your gesso is not as cheap as your black paint. So you want to make sure that you add your black in little dots. Anybody who's done any baking, who's tried to use food coloring, kind of understands this. Add it in little dots, because once it's there, you can't take it back out. And if you have to add more white to it, then you add more white, and pretty soon you have a cup that's this big, this full, and you have more than what you need. And you don't want to have to get rid of it. You spent money on it. So you don't want to have to just throw it out. And if you try and cover it, it's acrylic paint. It's not going to have a life for very long and be very useful because it's going to dry out and harden. So you mix it in small stages and you stir it with something that you can clean off easily. This brush that I have right here, this is a brush that I specifically use for this. I don't paint with it or do anything else with it. It is my Canvas Prep brush. It's very soft. You could use a house painting brush if you wanted to, but I wouldn't get one that was too wide. 2 inches, 3 inches is really good. You don't want to get this huge, massive one unless you're doing a really, really big canvas. Then I would suggest using paint rollers. But have a brush that has only this purpose. That way you don't have to worry about contamination of paints and other materials. Now, once I mixed it up, you can see that the cloth canvases, the cotton canvases, and the wood panels kind of absorb the color differently. Okay, this started out as white. This was kind of a golden piece of wood. So you can see how they take up the toning differently. So I've got these all toned. I'm going to tone this white one with you. And acrylic paint and gesso will stay in your clothes. So you have to be really, really careful about that. And we're going to tone this canvas. Okay, I'm just going to barely dip my brush into my paint. I'm not going to dip it as far as I can go. You really want to avoid having paint get in the metal right here. Now you'll notice I have some little bits of brown where my brown didn't mix in as good because it's a thicker paint, but it was the brown that I had. That was why I used it. I didn't have any of the other type. Barely dip it in. If you have some little bits of color that didn't mix in, just kind of work those areas. If you didn't stir it very good, I stirred it pretty good, but the thicker brown paint is kind of sitting in there in globs. I'm using a very light touch as I'm touching the canvas, trying to get it as smooth as possible. I'm working with long, quick strokes. I'm not going like this and dabbing at it, because every time that the brush hits and I pull up, you're going to end up with a glob of paint. So it's nice, long, quick strokes, because you're also working with acrylic paint. It is going to dry and get tacky very, very quickly. And if you work an area too much for too long, you'll actually kind of pull off the stuff that's already started to dry. So you want to work pretty quickly. At the same time, be aware of your full coverage. You want to get really good full coverage. Kind of go like this when you come up to the edges, and then brush that out. Turn it. You will get your fingers a little bit messy. Okay, then kind of stand it up and look for any tracks. Anywhere that the paint was kind of applied thickly by one side of your brush, and look for any tracks. You're going to go back over this with a second coat. It's better to do it in multiple thin layers than one big thick layer, because you'll end up with brush tracks if you try and go too thick at first. I actually added water, because gesso is very thick. I actually added a tablespoon of water to this before I started, so that it wouldn't be overly thick, because I wanted to put it on in thin layers. Then, once your layer has dried, you will actually take a very fine sandpaper, if you have it, and lightly rough the surface. It's kind of like when you're finishing or painting furniture, and then put a second coat on it. And typically, if I went this way with my first coat, I go the opposite direction with my second coat. Same thing, apply it quickly and evenly, and kind of hold it up and look for big mountains or valleys of paint, because you don't want that, because those will pop up when you try to paint later. So that's how you tone a canvas, and here in a little while we'll kind of look at color and discuss why toning your canvas is a good idea. Okay, hi class. As promised, we're going to talk about the importance of toning your canvas as far as how it actually affects the paints that you're using. This is just paper, but it'll give us the same effect. I've got an area that's going to remain white to represent a blank white canvas, an area that's been toned gray, and an area that's been toned tan. Now, when you do tone your canvases and you mix up your paint and you're spreading it on, when you come back, you might look at your paint that's dried on your canvas and say, oh my gosh, it's so much darker than I thought it was going to be. A good rule of thumb to keep in mind is that light colors dry darker and dark colors dry lighter. So it's not going to look the same wet as it will dry. Now, what I've got here is a very simple palette. These are oil paints, and I've got them on a piece of cardboard just because cleanup's going to be easier that way. And I've got yellow ochre, terra rosa red, ultramarine blue, burnt umber, which is a dark brown, titanium white, and over here I have my extras. This is a cadmium yellow and a cadmium red. These are going to be a very basic palette right here, these 5 colors. You can paint just entirely with this limited palette and do just fine and create beautiful pieces of work. Most painting classes that you take at the college level will limit you to a palette like this. You'll start out black and white, then they'll add another one of these colors until eventually these are the 5 you have, and you'll work with these for a very long time before you even touch the brighter colors. That is to get you into an understanding of what you can do with a limited palette, because a limited palette makes a painting very harmonious and very unified. Okay, over here I have my Terps container. It's got these nifty little latches so that it can close completely. It's got a little rubber gasket here so that none of the fumes can get out. And it's got a basket, like an inner basket, and then the outer container. So you can see the holes in the bottom, and as I clean my brush out, all the paint falls to the very bottom and settles, and you get clean solution on top. So it's a nifty thing. So the first thing I want to do is going to show you how, if I mix a very light color using white, what kind of effect that has on the 2 different ones. So I'm going to grab just a little bit of white, like that, and I'm going to grab a little bit of my yellow ochre from the edge, and I'm going to see how quickly that color happens. So I'm going to paint a little swatch right there, my yellow ochre. I'm going to come over and paint the same little swatch right there. And then I'm going to come over and mix just a little bit more. I'm using a really old short bristle brush. Okay, look at how different the same color looks. You saw me mix it. I put a spot there, a spot here, and a spot here. Look how different that yellow looks on the different toned areas. Right here, a lot more of the darker mustardy part of the yellow comes visible. This one looks lighter. Look how bright this one looks. That's because the brown base is a warm color, so it boosts the warmth of the yellow, and this gray has a cool base, which kind of dulls the yellow just a little bit, and the white is just white. It doesn't really do anything. So I'm kind of cleaning my brush off. Don't want the yellow to get into my other colors. Now we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to mix like an orange. Okay, so gotta put it back up there. Okay, so I'm going to just mix our primaries and our secondaries here. So if I just used a plain yellow ochre by itself without any white mixed, that's what it would look like. That's what that would look like. And here's what that one would look like. So it's a really weird optical effect, but that's kind of why you want to tone your canvas, because you kind of get some dramatic stuff going on. Okay, now I'm going to mix a orange using my terra rosa red, my yellow ochre. These are really good colors for mixing a nice flesh tone. So I'm just going to mix a nice flesh tone here instead of an orange. So from here, I can take this flesh base and I can make it a little bit more yellow. I can make it a little bit more reddish. I can make it a little bit more brownish. I can make it darker. And so you can kind of take a mid-tone and go from there. Okay, here's kind of a mid-tone. See the differences there? Okay, now I'm going to use the ultramarine blue. And I'm just going to grab just the ultramarine blue by itself. There's how the blue looks on the gray, on the white, on the tan. Okay. Now I'm going to take my white, of course. It's not going to really show on the white, hardly at all. Really pops on the gray and really pops on the tan. Notice though over here it's kind of a cooler and over here it's a little bit warm. White is a cool color anyway. It tends to cool down things. Sometimes it makes them chalky. Okay, now I'm going to delve into some of our brighter colors and you can kind of see how those be affected. So here I'm going to mix a nice orange. There's a nice bright orange. Make sure I get all the color mixed. Orange. Doesn't look nearly as bright on the white, does it? Orange. Look at the differences there. Okay, I went and grabbed a different brush. Actually, they're not really that different. These are the same brush, just at different stages in their life. As you can see right here, they're both Winsor Newtons. They're both size 2, but this one has been used a bunch and this one's newer. So that's why I went and grabbed it. This brush, even though it's all short, is still very useful for certain things. So now I kind of did these colors, and what I'm going to do next is I'm going to make a little color wheel for you so you can kind of see a fairly broad range of colors on each of the different surfaces. So I'm going to make yellow our top one, and I'm still going to use my yellow ochre, and then I'll just put a cadmium yellow next to it. So I'm going to start at the top with yellow for my color wheel. A little bit more paint, a little less turpentine. And then over here, so there's our yellows. Then I'm going to do our red. So here's my Terra Rosa red. From my limited palette. I'll set these up to be seen better whenever they're dry. And then our ultramarine blue. Okay, so we got our blue. A little bit more. Blue. Blue. Okay, got a little bit of a glare from my lights up here on this tan side. Maybe if I move it this way a little bit. Yeah, kind of helps, but yeah, I'll get us a better shot of that here in a little bit. Don't like that glare. Okay, now I'm going to mix my secondary colors. So right here I'm going to have an orange, purple, green. So I'm going to make an orange, and this time I'm going to put this red right here to represent our other type of red, which is cadmium red. Before I mix our oranges. And then I'm going to do the same thing with our cadmium yellow. Right there, right there, and right there. There we go. Tip it a little bit so you can see the differences without the glare. Now I'm going to mix a orange, just like I did before, mixing my yellow, my cadmium yellow, and my cadmium red, trying to get a nice orange out of that. Orange, orange, orange. Now I'm going to mix a violet using the ultramarine blue and the Terra Rosa red, and then I'll mix a second violet with the cadmiums. So and then I'll mix it with the cadmium red and the ultramarine. You'll see there's a difference. Here's with the cadmium. And here I'm going to mix it with a white so you can see a lighter version, more like a lavender. It really looks much better over here on the tan tone than it does on the others. That's why I'm such a fan of the tan tones. Okay, now we're going to mix our green. So first I'm going to use the ultramarine blue and the yellow ochre. Try and get a nice green that's not too yellowy, not too bluey. Green. Now your limited palette of the yellow ochre and the ultramarine blue gives you some very nice natural looking greens. That deep yellow of the yellow ochre gives you some real nice greens to work with. Now I'm going to use the cadmium yellow with the ultramarine blue, and it's going to be a brighter green. It really looks good on that tan. Kind of partial to the tan, as you can tell. Now I'm going to mix some tints, some light versions of some of these colors. So I'm going to mix a nice light blue with white and my ultramarine, and you'll get an idea of what that would look like if you're doing clouds and sky, and you were having to try and put light colors on top of that. So let me tip this up just a little bit so you can see that. Look at how that blue right there and that blue right there, these are the same blues. I just mixed them at the same time, and look how different this blue looks compared to that blue, compared to that blue. Very different, even though they're all the same color. The background colors and the colors around a color really influence how that color appears to look. So now I'm going to mix a nice bright yellow using some of the white. Make a really nice bright yellow. This is with my cadmium yellow and white. Notice the difference. Look how much darker this cadmium and white mixture looks compared to that one and that one. Big difference. Okay, and now I'm going to mix a yellow ochre with a white. There we go. Real differences there. That orange right here on this tan is just really, really grabbing my attention right there. That's nice. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's see, I think I haven't done any pinks yet, so I'll do a pink. I'll do white and Terra Rosa, which remember Terra Rosa was that darker red, kind of a more earthy, natural looking red. Terra Rosa and white, Terra Rosa and white, Terra Rosa and white. Look how much pinker that looks compared to that. Okay. I think the last one I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to mix a black. Okay, I think I've pretty much shown you what a toned canvas can do for your colors and how they can make certain colors really, really pop. Now I'm going to show you how to mix your own black. Most artists will mix their own black using a mixture of the ultramarine blue and the burnt umber. And the reason that that works is because you get so much more of a range. Okay, so here we go. Here is my black I made. Right there. There's how it would look right there. And here's how it would look right there. And if I want to make a gray using that black, mix a light gray. Here's a gray, which on this gray surface it's going to be hard to see. But here's a gray, and here's a gray. So you can still make gray. The nice thing is if I add a little bit more brown to my black, say I mix a black, still got white on my brush, I didn't clean it off. But let's say I want my grays to be a little bit bluish. And I can mix some bluer grays. And let's say I want my grays to be a little bit more warm. Say I want a gray that's a little bit leaning towards kind of a tannish gray. Then I can do that too. So when you make your own black using ultramarine and burnt umber, you can get a really wide range of grays that are all blue grays and the brown kind of khaki grays, and you can get a really nice deep black. So now that they're all side by side, let's kind of go in on each one. Just dropped my brush, it just rolled off. So you can kind of see here's, and I mixed all the same colors, but they really, really are so different whenever you put them on a toned background. That's why I prefer to use a toned background. Good luck and have a good time drawing.